lovely darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing The End of the Day by Claire North. So this is a sci-fi slash fantasy novel that follows Charlie, who is the harbinger of death. So before people meet death, they first meet Charlie, who comes as a warning, usually bearing a gift. And mostly Charlie's job is about honoring and listening to people, and I really loved this book. Like a 4-star loved this book. First off, I listened to about half of this book as an audio, which is read by Paul Kenny, and read the first half, like the physical book, straight through. I honestly kind of liked the audiobook better. Paul Kenny does a really good job with the audiobook, with doing all the different voices so that every character sounds distinct. And so when they reappeared later, you're kind of like, I know who that is because you recognize the voice, which is awesome. So Charlie is a Londoner. He cares a lot about people. He wants to help, basically. So he takes the job of harbinger of death to help ease people who are about to die. Charlie's job as the harbinger of death is to go first and give people warning, basically, that death is coming, so they can mentally prepare themselves for it. And the gift he gives them is a personal gift. So Charlie doesn't always know why he's giving somebody the gift. So he might give somebody a pen that doesn't have any ink, or he might give somebody whiskey. And just because it doesn't make sense to Charlie doesn't mean that the person receiving the gift doesn't know why they're getting it. Death also doesn't have to come for certain. Sometimes this is merely a warning, so somebody might get their act together and do something differently because Charlie came, and death might pass them by. Also, sometimes Charlie comes for ideas more than for actual people. This book is really interesting because it goes everywhere. Charlie meets all kinds of people. People who are super rich and influential and powerful, and he also meets poor people who the rest of the world basically would just glance right over. And to death, they're all the same because everyone's gonna die eventually. Not everyone who is going to die is going to get a visit from death and Charlie, but the ones that death feels particularly compelled to warn or honor, Charlie will come visit first. The whole idea of being the harbinger of death and what that means and the different ways that death manifests itself and why death might come for some people and not others, or why death might feel obligated to honor some people with an actual in-person visit as opposed to others, I found really interesting. The whole concept of death in this book is really interesting, and I loved exploring it, and we get to explore it from many different facets as we visit many different people and many different parts of the world who have different opinions on death. It's also cool to see how the rest of the world reacts to Charlie being the harbinger of death. Like, most of the time when Charlie is visiting, he just flat out tells people in customs that, hey, I'm the harbinger of death. Sometimes things are a little tricky and he needs to lie, like he gets into Syria by saying that he's a nurse, because no way Syria was going to let the harbinger of death into their borders. Some places are more accepting of Charlie, just like, hey, cool, you're just doing your job, and some places are like, hey, what's the harbinger of death doing here, and maybe we should investigate him. And some people seem to think Charlie has more power than he does. So sometimes, especially the rich and powerful, will try to plead with Charlie not to take somebody when Charlie's like, hey, I'm not actually death. There are also harbingers for the other riders of the apocalypse. We have pestilence, famine, and war, and they each have their own harbingers who come from different places and fulfill different roles. So it was kind of cool to see the other harbingers and the other manifestations of these things. So the key to this book is Charlie himself, and he's a pretty likable person. He just wants to help. He enjoys listening and interacting with other people. He actually genuinely cares about the living, and that's a pretty key part when you're the harbinger of death. It's to not just see the end of everything, but he also recognizes what has come before and kind of celebrating the entire life. Charlie's also good at adapting to different personalities, so some people, when they meet Charlie as the harbinger of death, just freeze out but don't want to talk. Some of them don't even want to take his gift, and Charlie's good at dealing with that, but he's also good at dealing with people who just want to talk now. Like, oh, if this is the end and this is my last chance to tell my story, let me tell it. Sometimes Charlie gets a little more involved than probably is necessary. But on the whole, Charlie is just trying to help. He is there to ease people into this idea of death coming so that they aren't like shocked. And we get to see a lot of Charlie's personal life too. So he has internal struggles and trying to rationalize his job and what he's doing. We also see him over the course of several years from when he first takes the job to several years later and how that changes him and how he views death and his place in the world and even just the world as a whole. So besides the job part, we also see Charlie trying to have a normal life in London. So that's where he's from. He starts dating and trying to have relationships that are meaningful, but at the same time, he has a job that has him traveling a lot, and not everybody's keen on dating that harbinger of death. So this book is pretty personal as we're dealing with everything from Charlie's perspective and rationalizing it, and it does kind of beg the question of how you feel about death and these different situations. We do get to meet the physical manifestation of death at a few points, and we get to see the physical manifestations of famine, war, and pestilence, which is kind of cool. And they're referred to as females, like death refers to them as her sisters. She seems to think of herself as a female when it's just them outside of humans. But then every person sees these differently, so sometimes they manifest as men and different, like they can be anything. They can be any race, any age, any culture, any gender. So it's cool to see how each of these ideas manifest physically and how humans think of them and react to them. So throughout this book, we get to see a wide range of humanity. Some of it is good and awesome. Some of it is the darker side of humanity. So this book definitely has a trigger warning on it for death, obviously, but also rape, physical abuse, torture, war, famine, disease all play into it. Cancer, racism, LGBT issues come up. A general warning that if there's anything you're particularly sensitive about, it could appear at any point in this book as Charlie is visiting different people. And then Charlie has pretty strong opinions on equality and racism and human rights and LGBT rights. So just fair warning on that also. Like, there are very staunch political views expressed in this book, and I personally agree with Claire North, so I didn't have a problem with that. But I think if you didn't agree with her, this could be kind of hard to take, maybe. There are certain chapters of this book that are literally just random sound bites. Like if you were sitting in the middle of a room and just listening to snippets of conversations, and reading it was a little bit hard to take. Like it's overload, but listening to the audiobook, that's where the audiobook really shines because they're all in different voices and you kind of get a better sense of what these conversations sound like. The rest of the book I thought was awesome. All the prose, all the following Charlie, like actual normal storytelling, I was fine with. So on the whole, I enjoyed at the end of the day. It is definitely a 4-star read. I'm not sure that I'm going to pick this book up and reread it anytime soon. Like maybe it would be interesting to revisit this book a few years from now and see if my thoughts have changed as I grow older and have different experiences in life. It is a bit intense at times. It definitely had me crying and had me worrying about Charlie and other characters in this book at times. But on the whole, I really enjoyed this read. And I highly recommend The End of the Day by Claire North. And I am totally going to go read more of Claire North's books. So peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. Bye.